Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and today we are talking about Hadrian's Wall, but not in a way that you would expect. A few months ago, several English newspapers reported that English Heritage, a British organisation directly under the DCMS, Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, and responsible for managing English archaeological and cultural heritage, had presented Hadrian's Wall as a gay landmark, gay icon, or part of queer history. Something like this can be found on the Telegraph, Daily Mail, The Independent, and a few other websites. Here, Hadrian's Wall is presented as the first of 7 archaeological sites linked to England's queer history. Now, even though I've been very passionate about Roman history for the past 15 years, I sort of fail to understand what's queer about a 117 kilometers wall or defensive structure which purpose was to keep the Picts at bay. But perhaps these articles will illuminate my understanding. Let's see. The English Heritage website initially describes the characteristics of the wall stretching 70 miles across the landscape. Hadrian's Wall still shapes northern England's landscape, 1,900 years after it was built. It is a lasting mark the Emperor Hadrian left on Britain. So far so good. However, immediately after, without a real and sensible logical connection, we are informed of Hadrian's supposed sexual and sentimental inclinations. We read, but besides Hadrian's policies and reign, the emperor also leaves behind a legacy associated with intense adoration for his male lover, Antinous. Now, how the sexuality and relationships that the emperor had can reflect on the wall itself is a little bit lost on me, considering the fact that the way I view it, the wall has nothing that could be connected to queerness, to homosexuality, to any message of like love is love. No, it's a wall to stop people from invading. If anything, it's a dividing structure, if you will. Just to drive my point home, I could understand if Emperor Hadrian had built a statuary complex, and within this complex there were all sorts of statues representing the love that he had for this other man, who wasn't a man by the way, but we'll get to that, to this other person, and we see like male love expressed everywhere, then I can understand. You know, it's not like that I'm saying, oh no, you're not supposed to say it. The only thing is that I absolutely fail to understand the connection with the wall. I think the reasoning presented in these articles is that they are trying to be inclusive. But the problem is that what they're trying to do instead is that they are taking a person who is obviously a complex individual, particularly Hadrian was quite, there's a lot to say about this man, and instead of looking at all of the characteristics that shape him, say for instance his tolerance, the fact that he was a reformer, the fact that he was a skilled politician, a philosopher, a lover of the arts, a military strategist, none of that is mentioned, and the only thing you're telling me is that he was queer. At least in my eyes, let me know if you agree, particularly if you are gay, but in my eyes that's insulting to gay people. Because basically all you're telling me is, well, we remember him because he was gay. That's it. That's the only interesting aspect of this man, is that he was gay, and therefore the wall he built was also gay. No, sorry, if you find a person in history who is not straight, then what you should do is, in my opinion, is underline all of his qualities in order to show to the people that tend to instead to point the finger and say, oh, gay bad, and show them, no, there is much more to this person. Let's not fixate on this person's sexuality. But that's the problem with these sort of virtual signaling positions of articles. They're pretending they don't care, and here we are. So in reality, Hadrian's Wall is linked to England's military history, or maybe we could say linked to England's ancient borders, perhaps linked to England's Roman history, but linked to England's queer history is nonsensical. That is because nothing that happened on the wall, near the wall, and because of the wall is in its intrinsic nature connected to the emperor's sexuality, not his construction, not the purpose of its construction, not the way it was built, nothing. Now, having showered these people with a little bit of reason and logic, I think I'd like to now start have this opportunity to actually talk about Hadrian's sexuality from a historical standpoint based on the sources, because that is a little bit of a thorny chapter, if you will. So that if you are gay and you're interested in this person, you can get some real history here, rather than someone who is pretending to pander to you. Let's go. Already I'd like to say that his relationship with Antinous, who came from a wealthy Greek family in Bithynia, in present-day Turkey, was already known and exalted by classical historians. And the emperor's marriage to Vibia Sabina was neither happy nor successful. But the Historia Augusta also reports his multiple extramarital affairs with married women. So much so that the historian Jerome Carcopino hypothesized that the first of his adopted sons, Lucius Caeonius Commodus, was actually his natural son. So already for context, since I have seen people that don't actually use the word queer, they even use the word gay, Hadrian wasn't gay in the modern sense. It would be closer to a modern bisexual, although then again it doesn't work the exact same way. But since I've explained it so many times in my videos, I'm just gonna give you the smallest definition possible. He would have engaged in both heterosexual and homosexual activity, which was quite common, although then again, not as common as people think in the past. But it wouldn't have been a situation like a modern bisexual person who is like, well, you know, I'm attracted to both men and women, so maybe tomorrow I find a man and he's my boyfriend now, but then I want to, you know, maybe we break up and then instead there is a woman. No, that's not how it works. The idea of family in the sense of procreation was still the sort of predominant thing. It's just that some men, as long as they were high rank and high status, wouldn't have been frowned upon if they were having homosexual relationship with younger men who were of lower status. It was quite complicated and it really worked differently. But if you want to know more, I've got more videos. I'll leave links in the description, of course. But for simplicity's sake, it would be closer to a bi. Closer, not the same. Sort of similar to the situation we have with both Julius Caesar and most importantly and most famously Alexander the Great. I am of course aware that there are people that don't believe that Alexander the Great had any sort of homosexual relationship as well as heterosexual relationships, and there are people that push this idea, no, he was 100% straight. I've already said I disagree with that because that's what the sources tell us, and therefore once again, link in the description if you want to hear a full analysis of Alexander the Great, which also includes a chapter about his supposed sexuality. Now, you may have noticed that towards the beginning of this video, I did make a statement. I said that Antinous was not a man. The love that he had for this other man, who wasn't a man, by the way. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that the emperor was about 42 years of age, but the kid was 12. So if the relationship is true, this isn't really a situation of homosexuality or gayness or queerness of like, and then you imagine, oh, there was, you know, you had the emperor and then you had this other man, a little younger, but they are in love and love is love, and so this is a queer icon of gayness. No, this is what we are talking about. Just so we know what's being presented. Now, it was the emperor, of course, so the emperor can do whatever he wants because he has power, but that's the situation. The next thing I'd like to point out, however, is that some people might say, well, yeah, but it was a different time. But then again, the people that say this, I don't think they have gone deeply into Roman society and how it worked, because even at the time, this was receiving some backlash. Let me prove it to you. Even for the 2nd century AD, 12 years old was too young. Specialized literature agrees that adolescence for male in Imperial Rome began around 14 years of age. As the rhetorician Gaius also points out in his Institutes, written around 161 AD, to contract marriage, boys must be of an age of puberty, that is, 14 years old, and girls 12. I understand that of course we frown upon that, but I'm just trying to give you some context here. It is also important to say that epigraphic data does not show any marriage happening to men under the age of 15. So even though one source does tell us 14, epigraphic data tells us 15. So it's a complex puzzle. It's something that needs to be deeply examined. However, before trying to take Hadrian and his relationship with Antinous and put it on a pedestal, we also need to understand the context that a young boy from a wealthy Anatolian family certainly couldn't have refused the love advances of the emperor, effectively the most powerful man in the world in any way. The overall picture tells us, therefore, that we should avoid clumsy attempts to update the relationship between Hadrian and Antinous as something beautiful that should be celebrated, because what history tells us instead, as you look into it, it's something decidedly, excusing the term, problematic. So, is it really helping the cause of gay people trying to be recognized and mostly just wanting to live their lives to take something like this, which is, I know I just told you, anyone can find this information. Does it really help these people to take something like this and put it on a pedestal and say, look, the Hadrian's Wall is now a symbol of queerness? You're not helping their case one bit. Not only because it doesn't make any sense since it was just a defensive structure for military purposes, but also because if you try to connect it to his sexual life, well, it was already controversial in the freaking 2nd century. So never mind today, when we look at the age of his lover. If you appreciate my content so far and wish to help ensure my ability to continue to tell it how it is, regardless of any possible backlash, please support this channel on Patreon. Any support helps me and my team of academics keep the channel strong and gives us the means to fight back against the political rewriting of history. Stand with us, form the wall, defend the truth. So my suggestion before we continue is to perhaps look for different people to use for representation. And if you want, I can give you some examples and some names. In fact, I could make a dedicated video. Just not Hadrian, and as I mentioned, absolutely not Elagabalus. Yes, that's how you pronounce it in Latin. Now, talking about the death of Antinous, which occurred under unclear circumstances, cast a further shadow of doubt on the relationship between the two. While most sources, including Hadrian himself, speak of a drowning following an accidental fall into the Nile, Cassius Dio alludes to a sacrifice of the young man, voluntary but promoted by the emperor himself. We read, "He had been a favorite of the emperor and had died in Egypt, either by falling into the Nile, as Hadrian writes, or, as the truth is, by being offered in sacrifice. For Hadrian, as I have stated, was always very curious and employed divinations and incantations of all kinds. Accordingly, he honored Antonius, either because of his love for him, or because the youth had voluntarily undertaken to die, it being necessary that a life should be surrendered freely for the accomplishment of the ends Hadrian had in view." So let me get this straight. Not only we are in a situation where a 40-year-old man with power is having a relationship with a 12-year-old kid, but he most likely also ended up sacrificing the... Oh my gosh. Yeah, what an icon. I'm not done. Aurelius Victor, going into more detail, reports that Antinous allegedly offered himself voluntarily as a sacrifice during a magic rite whose purpose was to prolong Hadrian's life, as the emperor's health was notoriously poor. Yeah, love is love, that's not love. It's not love. Sacrifice him so you can live longer, not love. When Hadrian wanted to prolong his life, a magician had demanded a volunteer in his place. They report that although everyone else refused, Antinous offered himself. De Caesaribus 14:8. When on the one hand the narrative, seen from a certain perspective, could encourage the romantic view of the lover's sacrifice in favor of the beloved, on the other hand, a different approach cannot be ignored. If Antinous' death was not actually the result of an accident but of a sacrifice, and if this sacrifice was actually voluntary, why does Hadrian not mention it, reporting the accident thesis instead? Why is he hiding it? And again, how much room for autonomous maneuvering could a young provincial really have with respect to the wishes or supposed needs of the Roman emperor? After having equipped you with what period sources tell us, I think I built a strong case when it comes to why this is absolutely not a gay icon in any stretch of the definition, no matter how you look at it. With that being said, I do in a way understand where this is coming from, and I think it's a symptom of something that has happened. What do I mean? This is probably some sort of glimpse that marks the guilt that the active persecution of homosexuals by English law has left in British culture. In fact, homosexuality stopped being criminalized in England only in the second half of the 1960s, and one of the most famous British citizens in contemporary history, Alan Turing, father of computer science and famous for having decrypted Nazi codes during World War II, was arrested in 1952 for being homosexual and placed before the choice of prison or chemical castration by means of female hormones, opting for the latter, but then ending up taking his own life in 1954. And there is of course a very famous movie about it that depicts the suffering after all of the work in a way that is very, very touching from my personal point of view at a human level. It is also important to remember that two wrongs don't make a right. So just taking a wall like Hadrian's Wall in a way to try and redeem yourself for what you've done to people like him in English law is by no means the way to sort of represent the right of any human being to live without having fear. Not the right icon. Anyways, these are just my 2 cents on this issue. Obviously it's a complex issue and I understand that many people will have different opinions, and I'm really looking forward to read them in the comments. Just remember to be civil and to share your opinions. If you disagree with me, I doubt you'll disagree on the historical sources because, I mean, they're vetted and peer reviewed. But then again, of course you're free to do so, just you have to bring in data in order for us to take the critiques into consideration. But do share your opinions with me and let me know what you think about this. And as always, we're here to defend true history and bring in the real context. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.